I would request Kartikeya Sharma ji to begin his inaugural address, today's inaugural address. Well, he'll talk about responsible journalism, especially today when we need one very badly. Kartikeya ji, I would request you to come online.
Thank you, Royal. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, amongst the august gathering of ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members on the from the press, media, professionals, and distinguished guests. A very good morning to all of you. It's a great honor and privilege to address on this important occasion, give a keynote address on such an important topic. I think it couldn't have been more apt and more relevant today than ever before. Uh, I when I was thinking about giving the keynote address, I really wanted to it not to be a commemoration of world press freedom, but it should be more about reflection on where we are at the intersection and what it means to us in this industry, especially because the ambit of the industry is changing. I'm just coming from the Wave Summit, attending it in Bombay, and events like these give you an idea of what the future has in store for you. Today, content creators have found powers which have not been there in the past. And when I say that, I mean today, for one country or community or one person as a content creator to get to the furthest points and the nooks and crannies of the world, which might have taken hundreds of thousands of years in a traditional way, can happen in a matter of minutes, hours, and seconds. That is the biggest tectonic shift that has come in the world we live in. And that is the most vulnerable segment, if I may say so, are the journalists within that. Because suddenly the world has realized the power of content creation, the impact of content creation, and what it means. Countries can talk to countries, civilizations can talk to civilizations, narratives, communications, things can travel at the rate of light, speed of light. I mean, we've never seen this kind of an environment before. And since the advent of technology or the humankind has become more evolved, and the most affected are the journalists because everyone with their phone has become a content creator. Now, the reason I mention of this is because it's a reality that the journalists we need to live with and deal with it, especially because of artificial intelligence, especially because of the artificial intelligence and the anvil that is coming on. And the reason I'm starting on a very technical and evolutionary note is because that is a harsh reality that we need to confront ourselves with. We can keep on talking about everything else other than what is happening in the world, and be talking about a utopian environment, which frankly does not exist and is not there. And what really exists today is the harsh realities of the world and how the world is evolving. Now, the relevance of journalism and the press freedom becomes of far more significance and importance in such a evolutionary time, or I can say a watershed moment like this. Because you know when everyone becomes a journalist, then what do the journalists do? They stick to their craft, they stick to the art, the method in the madness which has been going on for hundreds of years, which has become to be called the fourth pillar, is not because it is just a watchdog. It is because of the responsibility that rests with journalists and the established media, who through their processes and years of work have built a system of checks and balances, of being able to take out the noise from the news. And that is one of the major reasons when we launched NewsX, when our network took over, we went with a very different tagline. I remember having this conversation with our editor that time, Mr. MJ Akbar, and we came up with a tagline and NewsX, and I suggested a tagline saying "News, not noise," which is pretty much in line and sync with what we are discussing today. And MJ, being an old school guy, said, We don't use no negative connotations in taglines. And you know what? I told MJ, this is the my generation, and this is back then. I mean, you could still call it the younger generation 10, 12 years ago. And my generation, and this is how we see it, and this is how we feel it, and this is how we'd like to consume it. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Today, the responsibility becomes greater, and so are the challenges. Especially on the journalist fraternity, we have very senior veteran doyens of the industry like Mr. Alok Mehta sitting on the panel. He would be a far better person to comment than me. But what I can definitely say is that we have to reskill. We have to understand that the needs of the day, which are changing, are not based on the premise of just the tenets of journalism, but are also the tenets of communications, narratives, and optics, how they're being played out. This has become a part of communications and narratives now. And journalism could not have been more vulnerable, especially for journalists, than ever before. And the reason I say that we are very vulnerable is because we need to embrace the change that is coming in. It is not to be seen as impingement or infringement of any kind on the freedom of press or the rights of media, because these are tectonic shifts which are being brought in by technology, by patterns, by consumption. uh, the power of an editor, for example, is far more diluted than it was ever before in the history of media. Today, an editor does not decide every story that goes on your website, or does not decide every story that goes on your product. You have a very different mechanism working in place because of that. And I think that is the most important aspect that one must realize. Having said that, I think the journalists still are the torch bearers of the fourth estate. And when it comes to any crisis, when it comes to any situation where the country or the world wants to know exact information, credible sources of information, that is when the so-called legacy media comes into play. And because this conversation about legacy media, new media, they're self-anointed medias. I mean, there is no definition per se. People in that confluence are moving, but it is extremely important for the legacy media to hold on to and be the torch bearer of that, because in this world of madness in terms of content creation, what are the basic tenets? What do we hold dear near to our principles and philosophy of our the craft, and that we have been doing and working on? And I think the threats are not how what they used to be uh, traditionally, which were political in nature or others in nature. The threats are come from much different firmaments now. They might be technological giants. They might be other platforms. They might be unequal, position of dominance that these platforms enjoy, which decide what content will do well, what content will not do well. I think we need to also look at the lens of that. The powers that be that actually can infringe upon freedom of press are not only the governments anymore. There are far more and bigger powers also which influence the outcome of content and media, whether it's print or text, or whether it's video. And the algorithms based on that, and then the policies of these platforms do determine what works, what doesn't work, what is watched and what is not watched, or what gets viral. So, when you see and you have a discussion like that, take a very holistic view. What are the real challenges? What are the new challenges today? I think the world has become a more different place in the last 10 years. Right from the Arab Spring to what we are seeing what's happening in the US and other places now. So we live in a polarized world. That's a harsh reality. And journalists, like any other human being of part of society, have opinions and have and are entitled to their opinions and do speak their mind from time to time. And their body of work also reflects their opinions and their mindset. So I think we have to move away from the traditional idea of freedom of expression, while the basic tenets remain the same of freedom of expression. But we also have to look at what are the new challenges in today's day and age of what can become an impediment in freedom of expression, and what the journalists need to do, and especially in this era of noise. how do you cut out the noise and actually go to the news and stick to the news and the fundamentals and the basic premise of journalism as we have learned it and have grown up, seeing it and trying to live by the code and the fundamental principles, because the bulk of the people you're competing with don't live by any code or principles. I mean, there isn't any area or subset. Frankly, there isn't even a law that addresses them. Forget frame, any other fundamentals on morality. So my point is that it's high time we really need to look at, while we're talking about freedom of press on today's day. It's an important day. It's important to understand what are the fresh challenges, opportunities, at the same time the threats that confront us as journalists, us as a medium, us as a fraternity, and we need to upskill. We need to understand what it means. The impact of AI is not being taken as seriously as it. I'll give you a small example. I'm limiting it to the television part, but I'm giving you a small example. I was speaking at the NAB, the News Broadcasters Conference in Las Vegas last month, a couple of weeks ago. And I saw that the future, the way these conferences are supposed to give you a brief description into what the future holds and how the industry is moving, which direction the industry is moving globally. And I must say, I was a little disappointed. I was a little disappointed because we are still talking about hardware solutions. We are still talking about fundamentals. We are not understanding the threat and the opportunity that lies with artificial intelligence and how it's going to intrinsically affect our industry. uh, I think we really need to have a deep dive into it, delve into it. And these are some of the most important aspects that we need to spend X amount of time as people from the fraternity in understanding these threats and challenges, at the same time, the opportunities and the strengths that they do present. So, my in conclusion, I would say that, we are today, perhaps because of technological evolution and advancement, today, getting our voice out there is far easier than it has ever been in the history of humankind. Virtually, to make out a video or put out there for people and have normal people, but for the same time, for journalists to compete with content creators, which are going into hundreds of millions and billions of people have become content creators overnight, uh, is something that we have to grapple with and understand. At the same time, holding core to our values, true to our core values of journalism and fundamental ethics and the freedom of expression, and being true to our craft and our audiences, remains the biggest challenge for us, not to be affected by these forces that tend to drive and determine the content. But our ability, our fundamentals and principles is what drive us, and that's what makes journalists different from normal content creators. And I think that distinction should remain always, so we can build upon that. And the way a doctor or a lawyer is looked upon is the same way a journalist shall be looked upon in times to come, because of their credibility, because of the fundamentals, because of the sound approach. And I think we will see the relevance grow more and more in stature with time, when the noise gets cut out and the real news comes in. And it's a matter of evolution, and we're heading in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karthikeya ji. Really, a great, some really great points raised out there. I just want to ask you a quick question before we go on to our first panel. As the founder of one of the largest media networks, what we're seeing around, I just want to bring this point of responsible journalism, just underline it a bit. I mean, are we doing enough to do responsible reporting? Because what we're seeing right now in the current context, I just want to touch upon that. How can we be responsible in our reporting, as journalists, not as content creators, because the barrier there is different. Uh, so your thoughts on that?
So, Rahel, the way it is that, uh, and pardon me being very blunt and straightforward on this, we put too much emphasis on ourselves that we know it all. And somehow, this whole idea about us knowing what the viewers or the readers want is a little utopian, which is also changing with times because of so many tools and that are available, which tell you exactly what people want to watch and what they want to read. I mean, these tools were not available earlier, and the editor's perception was a final perception of what they thought that the readers wanted to engage with or the viewers wanted to watch. Uh, as it turns out that we have put way too much emphasis on hard news, and we tend to only think hard news is what news is, and we have created our own definitions and confinements of what people want to watch, whereas the realities might be very, very different. So first of all, we really need to know what quantum of news is consumed in what platforms. I mean, you go to a news site and you will realize that majority of the content consumption is not of hard news, is of different news in nature. So it could be on entertainment, it could be on virality, it could be on many other factors that are into play. So first of all, there is a difference between the reportage on both the parts. Secondly, I think the most important thing that journalists should keep in mind is, the today in this era of social media, there is nothing left which is called breaking news. I mean, news is common to all. The moment it comes out, it is flashed out in a matter of seconds. That's the nature of the beast now. That's how the cookie crumbles. So your ability to report and differentiate your content is what sets you apart in concept and ambition from going forward from this point onwards. Your ability to do that and not fall into the trap of being able to, it's very tempting because that's how the whole world is disposed. Because once something starts getting traction, anything and all the content which is done on that is what will do well. That is how the algorithms are written. I mean, that's how it is. So you can't really blame a lot of people for it because they are doing their job. And everyone cannot be different, and everything cannot be different, and it would not be correct for us to assume that every person writes a different story, because 90% of content which is being consumed is very atypical. It's not different. I mean, this is we need to really call it out for what it is, and we really need to have a complete overall of our understanding of what content is being consumed. That's why I spoke about AI. That's why I spoke about digital. That's why I spoke about a tectonic change in people's mindset of how consuming content, and also of how you have to decide what content to go about. Having said all of that, true journalists will remain there and true to their craft and the core. And for them, a certain way of going about it is extremely important, and that will always have a space. Like good books always have a space, like good columns always have a space. Similarly, good journalists will always have a space.
Absolutely. So thank you, Kartikeya ji, for taking our time and joining us on this important day and sharing this important message with all our viewers. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great honor and pleasure to be here. And once again, I would like to thank the esteemed panel, all of the fraternity and Exchange for Media. It was great to be here. Thank you once again.